Well, welcome to everyone again on this side of the break. My name is Stephen Fite, as I told you earlier. I am your host for today's webinar featuring Melissa Williamson, and she will be presenting the power of family partnerships, engaging in the 6 essential building blocks. We are very excited to have her on the Frog Street stage this afternoon. But before we begin, as I told you before the break, I'm going to share one little song with you. It's a song called Welcome to School, and it's a song I wrote a long time ago, back around the year 2000. Gosh, that seems like a long time ago, 17 years. One of the favorite songs that I've written. And it's a great song that you can use during morning meeting time, anytime during the school year to get the kids up and moving, or even sitting crisscross applesauce and doing the movements in that position. So, I hope that you will join me. And the song goes something like this. Welcome to school, I'm glad to see you here. Well, we'll sing every day, hey, we'll learn throughout the year. And singing la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. All right now, come on, come on, come on, and clap your hands with me. Come on, come on, come on, and tap your feet with me. Now do them both together, it's easy as can be. When you do them both together, you'll do them just like me. Singing, welcome to school, I'm glad to see you here. We'll sing every day, hey, we'll learn throughout the year. Here's your part now. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. All right now, come on, come on, come on, sway back and forth with me. Come on, come on, come on, and roll your hands with me. Now do them both together, it's easy as can be. When you do them both together, you'll do them just like me. Singing, welcome to school, I'm glad to see you here. We'll sing every day, hey, we'll learn throughout the year. Join me now. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. All right now, come on, come on, come on, and pat your lap with me. Come on, come on, come on, and shake your head with me. Now do them both together, it's easy as can be. When you do them both together, you'll do them just like me. Singing, welcome to school, I'm glad to see you here. We'll sing every day, hey, we'll learn throughout the year. Singing, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. One more time, welcome to school, I'm glad to see you here. We'll sing every day, hey, we'll learn throughout the year. Singing la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. Excellent job. Well, well, well. If you would like more information about me, Stephen Fite, you can go to my website at melodyhousemusic.com. You can also follow me on Facebook.com/Stephen Fite Rocks, or Twitter at Stephen Fite, Stephen_Fite, or Instagram the same way. So we'd love to hear from you, and let's move on. If you are not a member of the Early Childhood Learning Solutions community sponsored by Frog Street on edweb.net, we invite you to join us today. It is completely free, and there are tons of benefits to be had, such as the ability to view past Ed webinar recordings and slides. You can take the quizzes and receive your CE certificates after you do so. You can join online discussions, even post some of your own questions for discussion, and there's a lot of other free resources to be had there, so we would invite you to join edweb.net and the Early Childhood Learning Solutions community. If you are joining us live today, you will receive your CE certificate within 24 hours to the email that you used to log in with us today. If you are watching this as a recording, you will need to go and take the quiz afterwards. Melissa, I would love for you to give our listeners today a little bit of information about Frog Street Empowering Families.
I'd love to, Steve, but first of all, I want to tell you, what a great song. I mean, I couldn't help but tap my toes and sing along right with you. So thank you for that great introductory song. We really appreciate it. So Frog Street is really proud to bring our Empowering Families book set to the classrooms and the homes across the United States and abroad. One of the things that really brings out families is their ability to share a book together and the importance of literacy in the hands of families and their children. One of the things that I really like most about these books is that on the front cover and the back cover, it gives parents strategies for read aloud before and questions to think about while they're reading the book to their children. And each and every one of the books actually has a little heart icon on the back cover that brings to light the social and emotional aspect and support for the learning in these books. So if you're interested, please take a look at them. More information can be found on our Frog Street website.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, Melissa, it has come time for me to leave you, and you're going to give us a great presentation. I know Melissa's given you some of her background before the break, and here are some more for you. But Melissa, feel free to tell them more about yourself, but I'm going to leave it with you, and I will see you on the other side.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And thanks to everybody joining us. One of the things that I noticed is that we've got a lot of middle school and high school participation on the webinar today. So I want to make sure that you're fully aware that this webinar today embraces what the core best practices are in family engagement. So we're not curriculum specific, we're just really talking about the best practices in family engagement. So thank you for joining us. This afternoon, we're going to talk about the power of partnership, engaging in the 6 essential building blocks of family engagement. So there's a quote there on the screen that really talks about shared responsibility. And one of the things that I want to mention is that the notion of partnerships and family engagement truly is shared responsibility. And in David Strawn's recently released book, he talks about systems thinking for social change. And that's something that we really have to think about when we're thinking about this notion of empowering families and family engagement. He mentions that for collective impact, that we really must have mutually reinforcing activities. We need a common agenda, and that agenda is student success, right? It's achievement in our schools. We need shared measurement, and certainly through the data collection that school campuses and districts do, there are those opportunities for shared measurement. And then finally, we need continuous communication. And that communication is kind of a trifold communication where it lands between the community, the family, and the school itself. So really, what's kind of the point? There's a lot of interest in this topic around family engagement right now. And a lot of the interest is due to something that you see here on the screen, just basic compliance, kind of because we have to, right? For those of you who are joining from our Head Start and our Title I programs, you know that you do this work not only because it's the right thing to do, but there is a certain amount of compliance that goes along with it. But we also want to make sure that we're building capacity within our families. And we're going to talk about how to build that capacity today, and that we can make sure that the school and the culture of the school and the climate is actually someplace that the families want to be, and so that they feel welcomed. And so a great family engagement program kind of lies somewhere in the middle. So when you're thinking about starting your family engagement or you're evaluating your family engagement, you need to really think about these 3 aspects and ask yourself the question of, is my program here in the middle? And am I maintaining measures that support that strengthening of family engagement there in that space? So I want to introduce you guys to something that you may or may not be familiar with, but it's the dual capacity framework for family partnerships. And in 2013, the Department of Education released this, and it was co-authored by Dr. Karen Mapp, senior lecturer, Harvard University Graduate School of Education. And you can download a full copy of the framework and additional resource supports here in the links that I've put out for you. But one of the things that this framework does is it really ties together how to start thinking about and how to strengthen the family engagement program at your school and also in your district. I'm going to highlight a couple of things today that I particularly want to mention during our time together. And those are the opportunity conditions. These opportunity conditions that are embedded inside of this dual capacity framework here. And the opportunity conditions, they're organizational conditions and process conditions. And inside of the organizational conditions, one of the things that when you're thinking about this notion of empowering families and family engagement, is it systemic? Is it something that is across your entire organization, or is it you just practicing it in bits and pieces? So you want to make sure that when you build your plan, when you carry out your plan, that there is it's systemic across the organization. And being systemic across an organization means that the leadership has to also be involved in developing and carrying out that program. It's got to be integrated. It's got to be embedded in what you do. And a lot of times, people think about family engagement as kind of the extra sprinkle on the cupcake. And I want to challenge you to think about it as the baking powder of the cupcake. It's not extra. It's not something that we think about after the fact. It needs to be used as a strategy to support all your other initiatives in the school and ultimately to support academic success. Obviously, it needs to be sustainable. So that means that you have to commit resources to it. When you look at the process conditions on the other side, there's a couple of things that I want to mention, and we'll get into detail a little bit later about a few of these, but linked to learning is one of the things that I want to mention. So I'm going to give you an example from pre-K. So in pre-K, we teach our children to segment sentences. Then we work on alliteration and we work on onset and rhyme. And oh, by the way, we also tell our parents that we're going to work on subitizing too. And what we're not doing is we're not linking that learning in the classroom to the home environment. And we tend to think that we're doing this by math nights, by literacy nights, but I want you to challenge yourself and really ask yourself, are you making sure that parents understand the concepts outside of that education jargon that we so often use in our newsletters and on our website and on our school and classroom Facebook pages? Are we making sure that we are practicing good relationship building with our family? Do we have an attitude of continually providing services to the family, or is what we're doing more developmental? And I really challenge you to think about this one because we want to work at developing our families right alongside of developing our children and really get out of the notion that we're going to continue to offer them service after service because eventually we want to lead the families to agency. We want to make sure that they're self-sustaining and that they're good advocates for themselves as their children continue into their school years. You know, family engagement shouldn't stop at pre-K or elementary. It should continue on into middle school and high school and then off into college. You know, some of you may have had the fortune to hear Dr. Mapp speak, and what she tells you is that when she was working at Trinity College, the students that were most successful were the students who had a family member or someone to mentor them right alongside of the college entrance opportunity. Because I tell you, it's not an easy process. And so family engagement really is something that is from cradle all the way through career. Finally, we need to make sure that it's collaborative. Are we really practicing that collaborative voice, and are we really listening to parents and making sure that we understand and have their ideas as part of what we're planning to do? Or as an education system, are we just really having our opinions and thoughts and ideas represented at the table? Finally, we want to make sure that it's interactive. And by doing these things and practicing these process conditions, we want to make sure that it's asset-based, authentic, and that we're honoring the family's funds of knowledge. Because believe it or not, every family has funds of knowledge that they bring to the table. It's our core beliefs that sometimes set us apart. So here's a quote that I'm just going to share with you from Dr. Mapp. Parent participation is one of the leading predictors that support students' academic success, regardless of where they come from. And so I think that as we are working together in this notion of family engagement and empowering families, we really need to take a step back and evaluate, are families at the table, and are they truly represented in what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build for them? Do they have a voice? And do we really understand what their needs and their wants are? So I'm going to ask you guys just to think about for a minute, what do you know about your families? Because what you know about your families is really going to lead you to ultimately providing better developmental opportunities for them. I'll give you just a short story that there was a school that I was working with, and they did a lot of drives for their families, and they were collecting foods and different sorts of things. And one day, one of the parents spoke up and they said, you know, what we really need are belts for the uniforms that are required here, but nobody's ever stopped to kind of ask us what our needs are. They're making assumptions that they know what our needs are. So I'm going to share with you, because we've got people from all over the nation here with us today. I'm going to share with you just a few statistics about families out there. So make note that 21% of our children under the age of 5 are living in poverty. And for some of you in communities out there, this percentage is even larger. As of 2015, over 24 million children are living in a single parent household. And you may think that, yeah, I know this kind of thing, but when you have families who are children and students who are living in a single parent household, is what we're trying to do, is it really working for those families? Are we meeting those families' needs? Are we hosting things at our schools when parents can actually come? As of 2016, over 7 million grandparents are raising their grandchildren. You know, we've gotten into an age where we use technology a great deal to engage our families. But one of the things that I want you to think about are all the grandparents and the people who aren't tied so much to technology. Are they really on your Facebook page? Are they really understanding Twitter? Or do we have to use some of those face-to-face opportunities, or do we have to use other opportunities to really increase their knowledge about what's going on in our schools? 15.8% of women have been victims of domestic violence. And why is that important? You often think about that when you think about where and when women who are involved in these situations are actually allowed to go. And typically it will be to the school. And so that's why this statistic is important. 1 in every 28 children have a parent who's incarcerated. And so you want to think about how you're bringing that notion and how you're really focusing on adverse experiences for children and adverse experiences for parents into your understanding of your family engagement plan. 3.6% of the adults over 18 have reported having a mental illness. And this is something that is getting a lot of attention in our media right now. Not only is mental illness something that's getting a lot of attention, but the opioid addiction and the opioid crisis in our nation is also getting a lot of attention. And how are we supporting families who may be struggling with some of these issues? So after hearing all of that, I want to ask you, what implications does your knowledge have? Tell me about, or think about, how you're using what you know about your families to inform your family engagement plan. So I've worked with many of you who are listening on the webinar today and taking you through exercises of exactly this. So what are we doing? What do we know about our families? And then based on what we know, how are we executing those plans? One of the schools that I'll mention, I know our friends at Carver Early Childhood Center. Give a shout out to Carver. They're on the webinar. We've been working with them for the past year, and they're now in the time in their campus where their mindset has changed about family engagement. And so they really are changing how they plan to make sure that every opportunity that they have for their parents that they're linking, schools are already doing lots of activities where you have initiatives and where you have programs, you're bringing families together, but are you tying those programs to the learning that's going on in the classroom because their parents are already there and they're encouraging other parents? And are we honoring cultures? So I challenge you to really think about the implication of your knowledge of really knowing your families and how you can support and increase in your empowerment of the families in your community. So is there really a difference? People ask me all the time, is there really a difference between parent involvement and parent or family engagement? Well, the National Association for the Education of Young Children kind of defines understanding engagement as the opportunity for programs to invite families to participate in decision making and goal setting for their children. So I think looking at that number one thing on that list is, are we always providing information that is not reciprocal to our families about goals for their children? Or are we truly allowing families to have a voice in that goal setting? So teachers and programs really need to engage families in two-way reciprocal communication. Programs provide learning activities for home and the community. That's that link to learning piece that we'll talk a little bit more about. Programs invite families to participate in program level decisions and wider advocacy efforts. I think this is one of the more difficult things for programs to start, to really embrace their understanding that as a whole, parents really do need to have a voice. And I again want to recognize all the parents who are on the call. I see that there are parents who are part of advocacy and advisory committees for school. And that's truly having a voice. And so thank you for being with us today. And for those of you who haven't yet ventured into that journey, I encourage you to start thinking about the starting point for that. Programs implement a comprehensive program level system. You want to ask yourself, is it sustainable? Is it something that we are doing in a silo, or have we committed resources to it so that we know that it will continue? Is our leader driving change, and is our leader behind what we're doing? Because that's really an essential support element as well. So in her new book, Dr. Knapp talks about 4 different types of schools. So the fortress school is really where, it's kind of all locked up. There's stop signs as you go in. You might have a parking spot that says 5-minute parking. What kind of message are you sending to your families? Look, we want you here, but only for 5 minutes. Or are you the come if we call you? If we open our doors to you on one certain day, one certain evening, we definitely want you to come, but we only want you to come when we call you. Do we have an open door policy? Are we allowing families to come kind of in and out and be a part of the campus as a whole? Not necessarily in the classroom of the child, so don't misunderstand that, but that we are truly an open door policy, and they can come in and support learning and all kinds of things that are going on all over the campus. But truly, we ultimately wanted to lead up to this partnership school here where families are really able to have an impact and they have a voice on what's going on in the campus and also the district. So here's the voice that I've kind of been talking about. I'm going to leave this slide up for you for just a minute as I talk through it, but a lot of times, most of our programs, when it comes to empowering families, kind of really stop here. We don't really think about what the next step is, and we don't really make sure that parents are involved in being change agents in their campus, and that we have an opportunity to really understand what their wants and their needs are. Finally, I'm going to get to what we call at Frog Street the six building blocks of family engagement. And again, this program is not something that's just for early education. It's not something that's just for elementary school campuses. It's really and truly the best practice in family engagement. And so what we've done is we've taken a lot of research and we've put together this package and this notion to help support campuses all over the nation to really build on their family engagement plan. You know, one of the things that happens when you get to this point about building your family engagement plan is that sometimes there's a mind shift um, change, and it really involves around mindset. And Dr. Knapp talks about the four essential beliefs around the core beliefs around family empowerment and family engagement. And we truly have to believe that all families have dreams for their children and they really want what is best for them. And all families have the capability to support their children in learning. It's just sometimes we have to set them up for success. We have to give them the tools because you think about it often with young families, young parents that are coming into your schools, or parents in general that are coming to your schools, they themselves may not have been successful in school. And so their fear is actually that school campus. And what we're saying is come in and face your fear every day. And for those of us who have fears of spiders and snakes, we wouldn't want to face that fear every day. But sometimes the fear of just entering that campus is enough to put families and parents on a defensive. So keep that in mind. And that finally, one of the third essential core belief is that families and schools truly are equal partners. And the responsibility for cultivating and sustaining this partnership and building on these six building blocks of family engagement really lies in the heart of the school campus and the leader of the school. Let's talk a little bit about building relationships. This is the number one building block when it comes to family engagement. You have to make sure that you're doing everything possible to build true relationships with families, that you're getting to know your families, that your schools are wanting to hear their voice, and that ultimately we acknowledge their importance in this team of this kind of systems theory where it takes really kind of takes a village. So this slide I'm going to show you, I want you guys to kind of count all the dots here. I'm going to leave it up for a few minutes. Count all the dots you can see. So enter into the chat box if you would. How many dots did you guys see? And I venture to say that when you enter into the chat, many of you are going to have different answers. You're like, I don't know, I couldn't see any, or there are 5. I see a bunch of people saying 35. One of the things that I want you to think about is that just like this, we all come from different walks of life, and we all start seeing things differently. And so when you're working with families, one of the things that you have to do is you really have to understand your own personal bias and kind of what that looks like, and acknowledge that regardless of who we are, we all kind of carry those personal biases with us. Here's an example. Very well-educated man who's a doctor, right? At first glance. Well, if you saw him like this, what might be your personal bias? Would you still think about this gentleman in the same way as in the first picture that you saw him here? Oftentimes, even though we might not like to admit it, we judge a book by its cover, don't we? And we do the same thing when it comes to families. And so I really challenge you to really understand what your personal biases are and admit them, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward with the families um, that are sometimes the hardest to get to know, right? So when we talk about relationships, one of my favorite quotes from Mr. Rogers: mutual caring relationships require kindness and patience, tolerance and optimism, joy in others' achievements, confidence in oneself, and the ability to give without undue thought of gain. And so, certainly, if you think about any relationship that you have in your life, these are the things that you have to put into it, right? It requires us to be kind to parents. And sometimes there's a certain level of patience that we have to display. And obviously, tolerance. Tolerance is a big thing, particularly when it comes to understanding our own personal biases, right? Optimism is definitely one thing because too often we don't really seek down to really understand the strength of our families. I challenge you to really, in your thinking, make sure that you're optimistic and that you're honoring the family's funds of knowledge, joy in their achievements, and confidence in what you do. This is one that kind of hits home with me. So in my doctoral research, one of the things that I'm studying is the competencies around family engagement that with teachers. And so in my travels across the country with Frog Street, I've been fortunate enough to come across teachers who say to me all the time, I really don't understand how to get the work going, and I don't understand how to sustain the work. And so I wish I would have learned X, Y, and Z, and I wish somebody would have told me A, B, and C before I got to the classroom. And so just knowing that you're willing to put your best foot forward when it comes to engaging families, I think helps really support your confidence level when you do get in front of them. And then finally, giving without undue thought of gain. Second building block of family engagement is we really have to view our parents as a senior partner. They have a lot to offer, and until we start viewing these families as our senior partner, we're really not going to understand all that they do have to offer. And so it's really necessary that we view them as senior partners. And third, identifying strengths. And so if I was with you in person, I would show you this great picture of a family living room that is kind of in disarray. And I would ask you to identify strengths. And one of the things that you need to remember is that just by bringing children to school, that is one of the strengths that families have because they've entrusted you to educate their children and entrusted you to provide a safe space for their children and their students. And so, in turn, we really need to, again, look at them as asset based and not as having so many deficits. So, what are some of their strengths? If all you can find is that they're bringing their children to school, I challenge you to, number one, dig a little deeper, but number two, run with that and see how you can truly connect with that particular family and support their learning as well as their child's learning. So number four, we want to make sure that you're involving the whole family. And why is involving the whole family important? I think that you'll find across cultures that are represented here in the United States and abroad, one of the things that's important is that they really do believe in that it takes a village concept. And so having the extended family or people who are not blood relatives, but they call their family, being invited into to the schools and to the events that you're having and to the programming that you're offering in the local community, at the community center, or at the park, or at the football game is equally as important. But one of the things that you also have to remember is that sometimes older siblings are the translator for these younger children. And so if you're at a program where you're serving younger children, to make sure that you're treating those older siblings with dignity and respect. Because when you're depending on them to translate for their parents, not only are they going to translate what you've said, but they're also going to translate how you've made them feel. And so I had a teacher the other day tell me that acknowledge this and say that, you are absolutely right, that she was actually the translator for her family when it came to education. And she would actually say in front of the school officials, in front of the teachers, that this teacher is mean, or this school is they're not being nice, or however she was feeling inside, she would relay that to the family. And so I want to make sure that as we are building our systemic family engagement processes, that you remember that the whole family is equally as important to this particular process. And finally, I'm going to get back to one of my favorites, Link to Learning. And so, Link to Learning is where you have the opportunity to really support in purpose, in intentional, purposeful way, the learning that's going on in that classroom to the family. And you are developing them right alongside of the teachers, right alongside of the children. So the teachers are developing the parents right alongside. And this is having to look at the parents through a developmental lens versus a service lens. And I want to make sure that this means that you're actually teaching them about what that sentence segmenting means, what that high school math equation, how that's done. There's a great conference strategy around this, and it's called Academic Parent Teacher Team Conference. And again, I'm going to give a shout out to my Carver folks because we just had a great professional learning on this, and they're actually implementing this new conference strategy. And Dr. Maria Parias out of Arizona State University developed this conference strategy. And what the strategy does is it brings the classroom family, the school family all together. And the teacher is teaching a lesson to the families just like they would be teaching the children. And then they give them supplies, they give them time to practice their methodologies with each other, to ask questions about what it is, so that the families can truly be involved in that learning at home. And so Link to Learning is defined as initiatives that are aligned with the achievement and the goals. And so we want to make sure that we're teaching those families these district achievement goals, these academic goals for the students. It's not just informing them about the progress of their students. And so we often do that. We have conferences where we are informing them, but we don't take that extra step to develop them and really honor their funds of knowledge in linking the classroom learning to the home learning. And so finally, expanding their networks of support. And so one of the things that we want to do here is really offer them the opportunity to have all of their basic needs met, because children and families alike are not going to be able to academically be successful if their basic needs aren't met. And so we need to make sure that we have the opportunity and we have the knowledge to support the families with whatever need it is that they may have. And look, families aren't going to expose those needs to you if you don't have that good relationship with them. So I challenge you to start there. I also want you to think about, when you're expanding their network of support, are you giving them opportunities to build social capital? Are you really giving them opportunities to come and to meet together in a place where they can talk to each other, get to know each other, and really create bonds with each other and build their social capital? Again, that will lead to agency. So in conclusion, before we get to the questions that you guys have, I really want you to understand that there are 5 essential supports needed for success. And in the dual capacity framework, these are mentioned that leaders are the driver of change when it comes to a movement of the empowering families and family engagement. So, leaders who are out there, I challenge you to take a look at your program to see what may be the missing link and to call on your parents, to call on your staff to really help you support those things. Next, you've got to build professional capacity because let's face it, guys, if this work was easy, we wouldn't be having this webinar, right? And so you've got to take time to build professional capacity within your entire teaching team, within your campus, and ultimately your district and your community. There must be family and community ties because the community is really important here. When you stop to think about the where the local workforce comes, that's where your community gets interested because they want students to come out of high school with soft skills. And we've all heard a lot about soft skills now and critical thinking and how individuals don't really have that, or those are the things that are lacking with some of our young people today. And so the community can really get behind you in supporting this empowering family.